Wait, you have a TV?
No. I just like to read the TV guide. Read the TV guide. You don't need a TV. Television addict! Television addict! Television addict!
Hey everybody, Ken Reed here, your TV guidance counselor with the show TV Guidance Counselor, in which each and every week for the last 7 years, I've had a guest on, we look at a TV guide back issue from my personal collection, and we discuss the difficult viewing choices of our collective past, and we do that this week as well. I think I'm hitting a groove here with these remote episodes. It is still weird. I haven't left my house since March. Maybe you haven't either, and I don't plan on leaving anytime soon. Everything can be delivered, and I am comfortable and safe, and I hope you are as well. But that hasn't stopped me from doing the show, and again, I very much appreciate you listening, but also all of your suggestions for guests and the guests who have contacted me and wanted to be on the show. It has been very nice, and I am working hard to get everyone that you've requested on the show. Also, thank you guys so much for the Patreon. I expected to see that go down in lockdown, but it's actually gone up, and we've gotten new patrons, and that warms my heart. I sincerely thank you guys so much. I know times are tough, and the fact that you would give me any of your money is just astounding, and I cannot thank you enough. I will do my best to try and get some bonus content up there again. Let me know what kind of bonus content you like. I put a lot for a while, and then I didn't get a ton of feedback, so I wasn't sure what you guys want to see, so let me know. You can do so at tvguidancecounselor@gmail.com or ken@icanread.com, or on the social media, or send me a message on Patreon. I'm at Kenneth W. Reed, R-E-I-D, or at TV Guidance. Anyway, on to the business at hand. My guest this week is the amazing Gabrielle Moss. She is the author of Paperback Crush, about 80s and 90s teen fiction, which, although not TV related, really, and not TV guide related, is very much TV Guidance Counselor adjacent. I love that book. She's very funny. I don't know how we somehow have never met in person. We've crossed paths many times, and obviously are best friends now, but she's great, and I've wanted to talk to her for a really long time, and it was a perfect opportunity. So this is a fun conversation, and I think you'll enjoy it. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode of TV Guidance Counselor with my guest, Gabrielle Moss.
TV is my friend, and it has been always there for me in time of need.
Continuing the lockdown sessions via satellite, Gabrielle Moss, how are you?
I am good. Thank you for having me and my cheap old microphone that I hope works.
Oh, no, it's a good microphone. We were just discussing, I don't know why I said that like I was Merv Griffin. Oh, no, it's a good microphone. No, that's a good microphone. We were just talking beforehand about how everyone seems to not really care about the quality of picture and sound these days, and you don't even need $100 microphone to be on CNN. So we're already way ahead.
I care very much about my audio output. This is all I got, man. Hanging on by a thread. Only audio output.
Yes, that's all I have, and I want to sound good in the apocalypse. But are you in Brooklyn now?
Yeah, I'm in Brooklyn. I'm in the same room where I've been for 4 months, 19 months. Who knows at this point?
It's true. It's been 19 months. So whatever the math is there, I don't get there. But so you're a fellow New Englander. You grew up in Connecticut.
Yes.
Near New Haven, I think you said?
Yeah, like New Haven, Bridgeporty. I grew up in Trumbull. Any Trumbull listeners out there? It's a terrible
Trumbull.
place.
That does sound like a terrible place. Like if you said, somebody's in Trumbull.
Somebody was in Trumbull, and it was...
Yeah.
It was... just a contempo casuals and some racists. Really not a great town.
Yeah, it's just like Stepford Wives, suburbia.
Sort of a little Stepford Wivesy, a little like some of it's like lower rent Stepford Wives, like we wish we had a Stepford wife. We've got this, I've got a mannequin that I duct taped a tape recorder to, kind of that level of Stepford wife, maybe.
Oh, I would call it like scratch ticket Stepford.
Yes, it was. Okay. I was living a scratch ticket Stepford life, absolutely. This is great. This is working better than therapy and helping me articulate my childhood. So thank you.
Oh yeah, no, we have lots of breakthroughs on this show, and I don't charge for that, and it's it's me giving back.
I really in these challenging times, I appreciate that.
It's all worth it. But having grown up in I grew up in Melrose, which is sort of the Boston equivalent type place. Although the weird thing about Connecticut, well, there are many weird things about Connecticut, but it's a state that doesn't really have one major city. I always call it a state with 5 Worcesters.
It is true. You need 5 Worcesters to equal 1 Boston. That's right. Accurate New England math.
It's just like sort of mid to high level towns, but there's no one like head town because you have like New Haven, New London, Hartford, and then what is the other one? Stamford?
Yeah, I was actually just thinking about this the other day. Maybe you can answer this. Like, I was like, when a band would come from out of town to Connecticut, like, how the hell would they decide where to play? Like,
we would just play wherever we were asked, really. I remember the worst show we probably played in Connecticut was in Meriden, I want to say. And that show was we were on the bill with some hardcore band. A hardcore band is sort of a misnomer. It was 2 dudes who were like rapping to heavy metal music, but it was almost, and they had no irony at all. Like they were total sort of townie type dudes, and their raps were just like call and response, but also more of a dialogue. So it was kind of like, I punched that motherfucker in the face. You did? Yeah. Like it was that kind of stuff for like an hour. And then while we were playing, we just had one dude really adamant that we cover War Pigs by Black Sabbath, which was not a song that we played. And I was like, oh, thank you, Meriden, Connecticut, or Meredith, Connecticut. I forget now.
Oh, there's definitely a Meriden, yeah.
There's probably both. We played the LNG, which I think was in New Haven, or in New London.
Must have in New London. Like if you lived in like where I lived, like New London, like what a world away. Even though like now I'm like that was 45 minutes away, like max maybe. But it seemed like another world.
They have totally different subways there. And by that I mean the sandwich shop, not the actual subway. But I guess we're around Stamford's like the college town, so that's where like the Toads place.
Toads is in New Haven. I'm sure this discussion is absolutely thrilling to anyone who was not in New England in the 90s. Yep. But Toads place was in New Haven. That was
okay. Everyone's shut off by now. But I've done comedy there at like rock clubs, and that's where like all the Frank Pepe's pizza and the steamed cheeseburgers and all that kind of stuff is.
Where you can get that stuff, and you can play a VFW show where they leave all of the fluorescent lights on the whole time.
That's right. And you have to pay 2 cops overtime to stand there and judge you and be on their phones now, I suppose. But yeah, we played down there a lot. There was some Connecticut bands. We'd usually get stuck playing with the Casualties, who are, for people that don't know, a terrible New York band that for some reason every punk rock kid loved. And I think it was just a full-on Emperor's New Clothes situation.
Oh, I think a lot of stuff about that time period was like with a lot of the bands that were super popular.
I'm going to go on a tangent here, but they would never show up with gear. And they would show up with a van full of merchandise, and they were super Brooklyn-y. So they'd be like, hey, you guys will use your gear. And then they'd just like break everyone's stuff and then sell like $7,000 worth of t-shirts and leave town. And it was like, how have you managed to pull this one off? But that was the most amount of time I spent in Connecticut, I would say.
Well, then you have a great taste of this 90s time period in my life where I was either at that show or I was at home watching Home Improvement. So those were the 2 modes in the 90s.
That sounds about right, because you're in the rare elite list of TV guidance counselor guests who have BYOTVG. You've brought your own TV guide, and you specifically were like, I need to do October 19th to the 25th, 1996. I own it. It's the only TV guide I own. And you said you have a very specific reason for it. But before we get to that, I have to say I very much enjoyed flipping through this issue. And it was one that I kind of had neglected reading because the 90s, I was just like, that was 2 years ago. But it's, 20 5 years ago almost. But there was so many things I forgot about. And we'll read the cheers and jeers when we end, but like there's a huge jeers about the show Townies with Molly Ringwald that I talk about all the time. There's just some amazing stuff in here that is crazy. And I forgot how weird 1996 was. But the cover, we have Brooke Shields. Why don't you describe it for the people?
So this cover is what drew me to acquire this TV guide, which I got like 2 or 3 years ago. But so it's Brooke Shields, who definitely at the time was like 30, 31 years old. And she is dressed like a sexy baby, I guess. She is like wearing a schoolgirl outfit, and she has pigtails, and she is wearing like knee socks or little ankle socks, and she's on a swing. And, she is 31 years old. And the net effect is just so, although this was also a very 90s thing, if you remember, this kind of like, we take an adult woman, we dress her up like a baby, and then we sexualize that baby. Like,
yeah, so she's dressed like an American Girl doll.
Yeah, even like she is definitely an adult woman. Like I feel like this was such a thing, though. I feel like you would open Us Weekly in the same time period, and there'd be like Jennifer Aniston in like a baby doll dress sucking her thumb, and you'd be like, "Ma'am, you are 29 years old. Like I don't understand what's happening here."
I would call the era pigtails and cleavage.
Yeah, it was.
Which I blame the Spice Girls for partially. But they were just victims.
Even at a Spice Girls level, it makes a little bit more sense. I guess maybe as someone who is also in my 30s and probably defaults to a sexy baby look a little more often than is reasonable, I feel a lot of empathy for Brooke on this cover where, maybe you thought this looked good when you looked in the mirror, and then like you're looking at a photo now and you're like, oh, shit, like I'm not a Spice Girl. I'm too old to be on a swing on the cover of a national magazine. That's what I'm imagining going through her head.
See, I immediately was like, why are you on a swing holding an umbrella? Because that was weird to me. And it bothered me that the tartan pattern on the umbrella does not match the tartan pattern on the skirt. Nor should it. But for some reason, I'm like, come on.
I mean, why is she holding an umbrella when this sky airbrushed behind her seems cloudless and beautiful? Also, why?
It does also.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, why is she on the swing? Where's the swing? What does this have to do with her TV show? Nothing.
And it does look like, because they've just put her in front of a sky background, that this swing is approximately 4 miles up in the air or like hanging from a helicopter.
Yeah, the whole net effect of this is very just, it really took me back to, a time like pre 9/11, nothing bad is ever going to happen again. Let's just, hang from our 4 mile high swings and just enjoy ourselves.
Yeah, just put those pigtails in, put on the hideous shoes, and you're a teen model in your 30s. One shocking thing to me, and I forgot that she wrote for TV Guide, but the article about her in this is written by Jane Pratt, who people may know as the sort of force behind Sassy Magazine.
Yes, that was the other thing that drew me to this, where I was like, what was going on in Jane Pratt's life that she was writing for TV Guide? Like, that's crazy.
I mean, shockingly, TV Guide for 30 or 40 years was the largest circulation magazine in the world. So it was, even though it seems like her slumming, it weirdly is like a weird mainstream step up, which is bizarre.
I mean, once I read it, I was like, oh, I'm sure she was paid like $5,000 to write this interview in an hour. I'm sure that's why she's writing for TV Guide, but...
Right. But this is also a great week, in addition to being scary for the odd sexualization of a 30-something-year-old woman as a baby. Although, side note, in your high school, were you allowed to wear Halloween costumes or like a dress down day or anything like that?
I do think we had a Halloween costume day. I feel like I was going through a period when I was like too cool for Halloween costumes, but I feel like other people might have done them.
Yeah, because... I pretty much wore what most of the kids would have classified as a Halloween costume every day to high school. But the thing that annoyed me so much was and it fits in here. All the girls in my high school, their costume would always be, they'd like show up in pajamas and put their hair in pigtails and be like, I'm a baby.
Lazy Halloween costumes are worse than no Halloween costumes.
Yeah, and I was like, man, that's not what a baby looks like. Like, they don't have pigtails and are in Victoria's Secret pajamas. Maybe I just don't know any babies.
They meant that they are a sexy baby, which we were not able to articulate as a culture until decades in the future.
I would say the thing that really allowed us all to understand the plight of the sexy baby was Ally McBeal.
I do feel like that is when we hit peak sexy baby, and then after that we couldn't go there anymore. You know, it was a different world.
No. But this is Halloween week,
yes,
which is always one of my favorite weeks of television. And I was shocked to see a 4-page TV Guide exclusive Gargoyles comic book, which was maybe my favorite Disney show, and the show that I always complain that when Disney tries to exploit their Halloween content, they're always like Nightmare Before Christmas, and I'm like, fuck you, that's a Christmas movie. And I'm like, you own Gargoyles and you don't touch it. What's wrong with you?
No one has tried to bring back Gargoyles. Isn't that weird? I've been thinking about that some. I feel like it must be viewed within Disney as like a weird miss. I don't know.
I guess, I mean, it's a great show, and it's dark, and it doesn't really fit with any of their other stuff. So, but then again, like, they're embracing that, like, Emily the Strange goth kid thing. You'd think that someone in the building would be like, guys, you know what we have in the closet that we don't use?
It is weird that there hasn't been like a Netflix reboot of it or anything.
I know, or even stream it. And then the other exclusive in here is, and this is amazing, it's an exclusive Are You Afraid of the Dark original scary story written by DJ McHale, who created Are You Afraid of the Dark? So there's an exclusive story in this TV guide.
No, this is really like this phenomenon of the Halloween edition of a magazine is one of my favorite, I don't know, pop cultural things in the world, when a regular mainstream magazine would have to be like, well, fuck, like, let's admit ghosts are real for 1 week. Like, we got to do it. It's the time.
Although for TV Guide, it would be more timely because obviously this came out Halloween week. But it's always weird when in like August you see like Martha Stewart's Halloween. You're like, do I need 2 months with this? Like, is that how long it's going to take me to really plunge all the depths and get all the subtleties in this thing? And maybe the answer is yes. So you bought this because of the cover?
I sort of bought this because of the cover. So I guess the long, short story of how I came to own this TV Guide is... So for a few years, I had this like lucrative, terrible job at a women's blog that was, you know, sort of like a parody of a corporate feminist website where you'd come in every day and have to write an article that's like, if you're such a feminist, why won't you fart in front of your boyfriend? Or like, why we need a Disney princess with an abortion now. And, you know, so I was very depressed working there, and I thought I'll cheer myself up by buying some shit. And so I started buying all this stuff from my childhood, like McDonald's toys and like the Girl Talk board game. And I was like, oh, I still want to die. I must have just not bought the right shit yet. And so on sort of one of these
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but why aren't we best friends? Because you've just described like my entire 20s. And 30s, and actually today.
Yeah, no, I'm still very much in this phase. But yeah, I was at some like collectibles store a few years ago, and I was like, surely here I will find the one thing that will complete this, and then I'll, you know, be able to live a normal human existence. And they had this pile of TV guides. And when I was growing up, we were not allowed to have a TV guide in my house, which, you know, my mother would be like, oh, you know, like, I think it's low class to subscribe to a magazine about TV. And now I'm like, all we did was watch TV, and we were incredibly low class. So she just didn't want to pay the $2. Right. And so I thought, if I finally get to read TV guide, like, then I'm a normal human. Then everything is going to be okay.
So you never even got to flip through it. Like, would you go to friends' houses and like kind of sneak away with their TV guide or anything?
I would read it on the checkout line a lot. Like you're like when you would have sort of the like 5 minutes in the grocery store where you could pull a magazine from the rack, then like flip through it really fast, try to get the gist of a few articles, and then like put it away before you had to pay. So that was most of my exposure to TV Guide.
Wow.
And then just this strange moment at this store where I was like, it's all coming together, full circle, healing these childhood wounds. Like, nah, we're okay now.
You're like, I am an adult and I can do what I want now. And that's, well, I can't say that's great because I do always say I live my life like a 12-year-old that won a lawsuit. And to be honest, it's not as fulfilling as it sounds.
I mean, as someone on a similar path, I gotta assume it's at least one of the more fulfilling paths out there. I can't imagine anyone who's spending that money on like a nice couch is feeling any better than us.
No, I can't either. Or like, oh, I put an extra percentage in my 401k. Like that's not, like, surely that's not satisfying. It can't be. Like I in the mail today got a lamp that looks like an atomic bomb explosion. And I'll have it on my desk for a couple months until I need the space, and then it'll go in a box and I'll never think about it again. But that's surely got to be better than my retirement. I
mean, how are you going to get the will to live to retirement if you don't have some Ren and Stimpy dolls, Oh,
exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And Nickelodeon, we're of similar age. Yeah. I think you might be a little bit younger than me, but Nickelodeon in the late 80s, early 90s it's hard to explain how important that was.
Oh, yeah, that is, I've spent a lot of my adult money that I should have been saving to have a normal human life on just like on Nickelodeon objet.
Yes, what's some of the best stuff you have?
I do have some plush Ren and Stimpy dolls. I do have just a lot of stuff I bought on DVD before I realized we weren't going to have DVDs anymore.
Like Pete and Pete or Alex Mack and that sort of thing?
All of that. I have some Alex Mack novelizations.
Ooh.
Those are exactly as good as you think they are.
I mean, to be fair, you could write those off as work.
I probably should have.
Because you don't mention those in the book, do you?
No, we didn't end up going into novelizations, which was like a enormous business in the 80s and 90s, and I feel so terrible for everyone who had like a career in that, and then like the bottom just dropped out when I think DVDs happened and people were like, I could just, watch the movie at home. I don't know if I need this novelization.
And I also feel like the internet allowed fan fiction to just saturate the market, because most of those novelizations are barely fan fiction level, I think.
Oh yeah,
from what I remember.
I mean, most of them are like, what if someone put a gun against your head and made you write fan fiction? Like, what if someone made you write fan fiction for something you absolutely loathed, but you were like, I need this $2,000 like real bad.
Right, involuntary fan fiction. But then you get the ones like My So-Called Life Goes On, which sadly is not a mashup sequel to both shows. Instead, it's Winnie Holzman writing essentially what was supposed to happen in season 2 of My So-Called Life. And it's very well done, but you read it and go, wow, I'm glad they didn't get a second season of My So-Called Life.
I did not even know this book existed. So it's just like,
oh, really?
It's just the outline for what would have been the second season of My So-Called Life.
She took the Bible that she had planned for the second season and wrote a novelization of essentially the whole school year of whatever it would be, sophomore year in high school. And it's the plans they had for season 2 written, as a novel form. And it's well done. It's her writing it. But my God, it's stuff that none of us wanted to see happen. Like Rayanne and Jordan Catalano get together, and, Angela's parents get divorced, and the dad moves in with that woman that he was in the cooking class with. It's like no, I wish I didn't know.
Oh my God.
It's one of those things where you're like, sometimes it's better not to know.
Holy, I didn't, now I'm like, I did not have much empathy at the time when My So-Called Life went off the air, because it was framed as Claire Danes' decision. And I was like an angry 12-year-old girl, and I was angry at Claire Danes. And she was actually attending college in New Haven around the time I was in high school. And sometimes you'd see her around and I'd be like, fuck you, Claire Danes. You canceled My So-Called Life so you could be in the Mod Squad movie. But now that you're telling me this, I'm like, maybe she actually was like the character she played, wise beyond her years, saw that this would sully the good thing they had, and just from that place decided to leave to go make the Mod Squad movie. I'm not sure why.
I think so.
In my mind, she is the star of Mod Squad and not the like thousands of actual successful movies she has been in.
I feel like was Mod Squad before Romeo and Juliet, but the one I always think of is it Broke Down Palace, where she plays the like, college kid who goes to a Turkish prison for having heroin on her.
Yes. You know,
that is not a beloved film.
People do actually only just remember her in Romeo plus Juliet, but she was working constantly in the 90s, and she was always trying very hard, but very few of those were actually good films.
Yeah, I agree. She's always likable to me, and I don't know if it's just because of My So-Called Life. I absolutely went to go see Ben Lee play at the Middle East in Cambridge when I was 17 because I assumed she'd be there, which she was. And then was just like, oh, the whole show. Not a bad show. But I would like to thank her personally for not doing the second season of My So-Called Life, because I don't think it would be as beloved a show if they made that second season, because it's that upsetting to me.
Oh, God. No. I mean, now I'm very grateful, too. And I'm like, and everyone else's life seems to have turned out well. Rayanne is like a duchess or something now, right?
Yes. And Wilson Cruz is jacked.
Yeah.
Doing well, still
and
working.
He's on like a Star Trek show, isn't he?
Yeah, he's on Discovery.
Yeah, so
as a doctor.
Everyone's doing great. Jordan Catalano's obviously fine. So everyone's doing great. Nobody needed the second season.
Yeah, no, not at all. Although I don't know what Devon, whatever his name was that played Brian Cranston.
I guess as soon as I said that, I was like, actually, he and God, what was her? The best friend who was also, the actress is also named Devon. There were two Devons on that show.
Yeah, it was, the other Devon.
Yeah.
And you're like, I hope I don't have a crush on the wrong Devon. That'll be embarrassing if I accidentally say that out loud. I don't think either one of them does much now. I will say that, and I've shared this online a few times, but one of the most exciting things I ever did in California was I was in South Pasadena and I went to the street where Angela's house was and where Krakow's house was.
Oh my, I didn't know that was a place.
Oh God, it certainly is. And it was ridiculously exciting for a man in his 30s. I almost cried.
Oh my God, you are hipping me to so much really important stuff. I had no idea that was an actual place that you could visit.
Oh yeah, and to have your mind blown further, even though we're never leaving our houses again and you could probably never visit this, in the block behind the My So-Called Life street is Pee-wee's house from Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and then one block to the left of it is the house from Pretty in Pink that Andy and Harry Dean Stanton lived in.
What? You are fucking kidding me.
Yeah, it's all like one walkable little neighborhood, and it's all there. And it's not too far from the Michael Myers house from Halloween and that hedge from the original Halloween where they see Michael Myers and then he steps behind it. That's all, like, you could walk past all those in 10 minutes.
The stupidest part of this is I have been to the Michael Myers house.
Oh, it's right around. It's literally around the corner from the Michael
I did
Myers
not
house.
know any of that was there. I've been to the Michael Myers house, and then I spent like an entire day trying to figure out which bridge over the canals in Venice were the one they walk over in Nightmare on Elm Street.
Nightmare on Elm Street?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, you should have just called. Did you go to the Halloween house from the end of Halloween and Halloween 2?
No.
That's right off Sunset Boulevard. It's right by the Comedy Store, and it's the what the hell's the kid she's babysitting for? That like the climax of the movie happens. That's right there, right off of Sunset Boulevard, and then across the street from it is the house from Nightmare on Elm Street.
What the fuck? What am I doing with my entire fucking life? I fucked it all up.
And I continue to blow your mind here. 2 houses down from the house from Nightmare on Elm Street is the duplex that John Doe and Exene Cervenka lived in the X days where they wrote the first 4 albums.
Okay, I don't even know how I have this. I have like a Google Earth shot of the sidewalk, I think, in front of that house where they put their names into the cement. I didn't know this shit was... What if I've been... I mean, now we're not allowed out of our houses anymore, so it doesn't matter. Anyway, I'm glad in like 10 minutes of this podcast, we've managed to get into 2 deep discussions about real estate and what things are next to other things that literally no one besides us cares about.
Well, I mean, that's what we're here for. Well, let's get into the guide here. So we're in 1996. Yes, we're deep in our individual loves of things that no one else probably likes. And on Saturday night, what'd you do?
Well, this is an interesting thing that I didn't really realize until you asked me to sort of look through this. I feel like I did nothing but watch TV when I was a teenager, and yet from looking at this TV guide, I realized I was watching it every hour of the day except for prime time much of the time. Like, I was very into like off hours, like syndicated TV, very into A Current Affair.
Oh yes.
Yeah, with the big like
that the noise?
Yeah, with the big like Illuminati pyramid logo. And very into like syndicated, horrible syndicated TV shows, everything from your Munsters Today to your syndicated horror things, like the shows where they would take the name of a popular horror movie and then create an unrelated TV show, like Friday the 13th, the series, Freddy's Nightmares, the series.
I will say, I do enjoy Friday the 13th, the series.
There were so many of these things like came rushing back over the past few days, like things I had not seen in years. New Twilight Zone.
Which was good. It was good.
Some of it was pretty good. The one that I had been watching prior to this, which I had been reminded of because Exene Cervenka has a small role in it as a waitress in a diner that is assaulted by Vietnam War demons or something. Yes. That one was not one of the best ones. I also in prepping for this watched an episode where a young Jenny Lewis plays the Victorian little girl. A Victorian little girl ghost who has died of tuberculosis and directs this adult man to like find her lost teddy bear, which is I picked some bad ones to revisit the series.
Yeah, those are like, I would say the new Twilight Zone, which started in 85, like every other episode was about Vietnam. Pretty much. And the pilot was written by Harlan Ellison and stars Bruce Willis and is called Shatter Day, which is a terrible pun, and is one of those episodes where you're like, is this a mess or am I just not smart? I don't understand what's happened here. Like, it doesn't make any sense. But the episode I will recommend to you stars Robert Klein, and it's called Wordplay, and I won't tell you the plot because it ruins it, but it's fantastic. There's a lot of episodes that aren't great, but yeah, we had Tales from the Darkside, we had Monsters, we had Amazing Stories, like the new Alfred Hitchcock Presents. These were all made a comeback. Yeah,
I was very, very into that and spent a lot of time watching that. And also, I remembered while I was doing research for this, I watched Saturday morning cartoons for so fucking long, long after I lost my virginity, like just up until I just moved into an apartment that didn't have a TV, and then like kind of dropped the ball. But
yeah, I literally watched them till they stopped having them.
I got so upset when they stopped having them a few years ago. I was like, I was gonna come back, I was gonna get my life together a little bit, and then I was gonna come back.
It really bothered me, and I will tell you, to this day, on Saturday mornings, I will put on like a YouTube playlist of Saturday morning cartoons and sit and eat cereal like a maniac.
I think that's beautiful. I think that's the only way to survive.
What are some of your favorites?
Oh, God. Okay. So from the actual 90s, I was a big X-Men, the animated series person.
Yeah.
I was very massive on every Nicktoon. Your Ren and Stimpy, your Rocko's Modern Life, your Real Monsters. Mm-hmm. God, what else?
Did you ever get into Reboot?
That sounds familiar, but I'm not like 100% sure what it is.
It was computer animated and was a world that took place inside a desktop computer. So they were like characters who were like lived in your computer and were like fighting viruses and stuff. It was super 90s.
I feel like I heard about that, but did not watch it. I watched a lot of... Do you remember this phenomenon of Saturday morning cartoons that were based on the life of a middle-aged male comedian?
Louie,
your Life with Louie, your Bobby's World, your Camp
Lil
Candy,
Bill, Lil Rosie.
Yeah, like it was. Looking back on it, I'm like, what the fuck was that? But I watched all of them, was very invested.
That was weird. And Life with Louie was essentially a show about the abuse suffered by a child from their alcoholic father.
I have not revisited any of those too much. I'm like a little afraid.
Yeah, I mean, some of them are good. I actually enjoy Bobby's World. I do not like Howie Mandel, and I will say that Bobby's World is the best thing he ever did. Maybe tied with Little Monsters, but certainly better than Walk Like a Man. And Life with Louie is, okay-ish, but Bobby's World's kind of worth revisiting.
I did learn recently, I'm sure you already know this, but it was news to me that John Tesh wrote the theme song to Bobby's World.
Which is a great theme song.
Yeah, I was, that man had his hand in every pie in the 90s.
He really did. Tesh ran the world. It's John Tesh's world, man. We just live in it. That's how it is. There were a lot of syndicated shows, to your point, and there was some, did you ever watch Dracula the series?
No. The great thing about syndicated is there's always more stuff and you were like, how did I miss it? How did I miss Dracula the series?
Oh, yeah, it was amazing. It was such low rent, and it was about these, teens who discovered that this businessman was actually Dracula.
Oh, my God. Of course they did. Of course, that's what you do. Yeah. That's what we had to do before there was a lot of internet access. Just discover which businessmen were Dracula.
Or, which businessmen were secretly Universal monsters.
That is how they should have rebooted that series. I think they made a lot of mistakes, and that was the number one.
I agree. If the mummy is actually, unwrapped and is just running some global business. But there was also one called She-Wolf of London.
Oh my God.
That was amazing. It was about this teenage girl who was American and she was an exchange student and she got bit by a werewolf when she was in London. And, it was just a really low rent but kind of fun syndicated series in the 90s. There were a lot of those horror series that I enjoyed, and now I feel like I might go revisit this evening. Yeah,
no, these were, I think, so between those and cartoons, that was kind of my primary, what I was watching on TV. I was also watching, where I lived, it was Channel 11, but I feel like everyone had the equivalent of this in their town. It was the channel that was always any hour of the day showing a heavily edited version of Cocktail or all of the less popular Stephen King movies. There's always showing Cat's Eye 15 times in a week.
WPIX, you got it out of New York, yes. Channel 11.
Yes.
And it was Maximum Overdrive.
Always.
Again?
Always Maximum Overdrive. And so I have this extreme soft spot now for all of the worst Stephen King adaptations. And, now you have to sell me on the really good ones. You have to sell me on the Dead Zone. But I'm let's watch Maximum Overdrive.
Yeah, Firestarter's really good, guys. Heather Locklear is in a small role, but it's pivotal. Yeah, although I will say I am still disturbed by the Firestarter Lot 6 scene, and I saw that in the theater, and I still have nightmares about that one scene. I've not seen it for many years, but I will still stand up for Firestarter. I think Drew Barrymore and Stephen King is a visionary marriage of the era, and I don't know. It deserves more respect, if you ask me. George C. Scott as a Native American government hitman? Well, it only sounds bad if you don't put it in the context of all the other Stephen King movies that were happening at the time, which were all so much worse. That's true. Wasn't that when Sometimes They Come Back was also a thing? That was a made-for-TV movie, 1990. Sometimes They Come Back. That was not great. That was when they decided the best vehicle for Stephen King adaptations was made-for-TV movies. So we had The Stand, we had It, but we also got stuff like Golden Years and The Tommyknockers. Oh my God. And The Langoliers with Bronson Pinchot. I have a very vivid memory, not of The Langoliers itself, but just I feel like clearing my schedule and making sure that I was home and in front of a TV for every night of The Langoliers, which I could not tell you anything about it except that it takes place on a plane, maybe. Yes. It's there's these weird creatures that eat. The plane gets stuck between hours, it's stuck in some side pocket universe. It's one of those things where you're Jesus, Stephen King, you could have funded so many college tuitions with the cocaine money that you spent in the 1980s. Because, oh boy, yeah. But what's your favorite King adaptation, even keeping in mind that you have this affinity for the bad ones? I mean, I do love The Shining. You can't argue with The Shining. That's genuinely good. In terms of a bad adaptation, actually, my favorite bad adaptation, and I actually didn't read the source material on this one, so maybe it was also one of his bad books. It came out before he
revamped himself as good again in the 2000s. But do you remember there was maybe in the summer of 2004 or 2005, there was like the traditional Stephen King, like a 3-night event he did like a fake haunting of Hill House.
Oh, was it Storm of the Century?
No, it was... Fuck, I should have looked this up. It was like just a fake haunting of Hill House where they just did everything except call it the haunting of Hill House, where they're like, you know, yes, we're here to do a paranormal experiment in this very haunted house and, you know, blah, blah, blah.
It was one of the episodes of Nightmares and Dreamscapes, I think.
Probably. Like, I had not read what it was based on, but it was like a pre-fame Emily Deschanel. And this is maybe one of my last, like, significant network TV memories is of... getting a Subway sandwich, what the Subway sandwiches were like in my town, and bringing it home and watching this, this I'm sure terrible, but I enjoyed it very much, Stephen King adaptation.
I was a sucker for all of them, and you know, now I look back and I get so depressed and realized how much, well, I can't quite blame all my anxiety and depression on Stephen King adaptations, because I was probably drawn to them, but like Pet Sematary and The Stand, like I'm just like, wow, I should not have been exposed to that, given my fragile nature and at the time, because oh boy, those are not fun. But to bring it back to the syndicated anthology horror shows, there's actually some really fun Stephen King adaptations in Monsters and in Tales from the Darkside. And
Tales from the Darkside is a huge blank spot in my education on this. I think because it was on cable, I think, at the time, right?
Tales from the Crypt was on cable, but Tales from the Darkside was syndicated. So it was actually on WPIX. It was on PIX, and it was on TV 68 here in New England. But Monsters, the final episode of Monsters, which was a spin-off series of Tales from the Darkside, produced by George Romero and David Rubenstein, who did all of Romero's good movies, is an adaptation of the Stephen King story, The Moving Finger, which is a really weird-ass story. And the adaptation stars and is written and directed by Tom Noonan. And it literally is one set, one actor, and is just unbelievably crazy.
See,
highly recommend.
There's always still so much to uncover from this very fertile period of syndicated horror.
It's true. And one of the great things about 2020, maybe the only great thing, is that you could watch those on your phone right now. Like you wouldn't even have to hunt very hard.
I will say that the roughest thing, besides the fact that the air is poisoned now, about quarantine is that you do have to get whoever you are living with kind of on board for all your TV stuff. And I have not had an easy time convincing my husband, who is raised a normal child and didn't grow up watching this stuff, to like watch Tales from the Darkside now. Yeah.
That is tough. Like, and you don't have like you time where they're like, oh, he's out doing a thing.
Yeah. I'm like, you know, you don't have anywhere to go, and I can't go back in time and make your parents not love you so that this is appealing to you. So I don't know what to do. But
Right. Well, I'll tell you this. If I had to recommend an episode of Monsters to really win them over, and this will totally sell them on it. There's an episode that stars a young Jenna Von Oy, who actually starred in a Christmas episode of Tales from the Darkside as well. That was based on a King story. But the episode of Monsters she stars in is a Christmas episode, and it is called Glim Glim. And it is about a magical creature named Glim Glim. And it's a fun one.
I am already sold. Also, just because this is going to be the only time in my life this is ever relevant, I do have to mention my own Jenna Von Oy story, which is that she was from somewhere in Connecticut, and we went to the same like children's ballet studio. And after she was on Blossom, they had this religious style shrine to Jenna Von Oy on the wall, just like all of her headshots, and you know, maybe there weren't votive candles, but it felt like there were. And, you know, you would go in and look at it and be like, let the energy of Jenna Von Oy infuse me, and bring my hip hop contemporary dance to New Kids on the Block's The Right Stuff to the next level.
I'm sure she would appreciate that. She's an author now. She's written a bunch of books about motherhood that are actually really funny.
Really?
Yeah, she lives down in Nashville, and she put out a pretty good album, and she's got like 6 kids and a bunch of dogs, and is pretty down to earth. Like it's shocking. But yeah, of all the people, Jenna Von Oy doing okay.
Wow, my big lesson from this conversation is that I am sleeping on literally fucking everything important in the entire world.
None of these things are important. You're probably doing satisfying and important life things.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I'm only doing things that would be improved if they were replaced by a book by Jenna Von Oy.
That's true. I didn't want to say it, but I recommend her book. It's pretty good. It's called Situation Momedy. That's her last one. But she's funny. And she survived having to play Lenny Clark's daughter in a TV series because he is good. He's a human Boston Herald comments. A man who still uses the phrase towel head on stage.
Oh, great.
Just a real gem of a human being. Yeah. So you were saying you didn't watch anything in primetime on a Saturday night. So do you remember what you were doing instead?
I mean, I was looking at this and I was like, there are definitely things on here that I did watch. Like, I probably would have gone pretty hard for Snick. So there's some of that, or on occasion I might be in 1996 at a friend's house watching, we had a VHS of Hell Comes to Frogtown, that would probably be getting a workout, whatever things unpopular kids in the mid-90s were doing with themselves. I did see that The Outer Limits ran on Saturday nights, which is something that I remember watching, not on Saturdays, but... The
90s Showtime remake series. Yeah, which is actually pretty decent as well. And there's a short-lived show on called Dark Skies that I probably would have watched, which I don't know if you remember.
No.
But it was one of the shows that was greenlit in the wake of The X-Files, and it takes place in the early 1960s. So it's got a cool retro vibe, and it is about the Roswell alien landing crashing.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
And it's this whole government conspiracy, and the clothes are cool, and it's a pretty cool show that, for whatever reason, no one... I get why no one liked it then. I feel like that would kill now. Like, people would be all about it now. And it's streaming on most of the services, and just no one seems to care.
Really? Why, there are these lost gems. No one is giving horror television from this era really, I think, the boost that it needs in the popular culture.
I agree. There's like a great show. Like, do you ever watch Brimstone?
No.
Oh man, Brimstone starred Peter Horton from 30-something, and it would have been a great mid-2000s CW show. But it was 1997 or 98, and it's about a guy who's a police detective who gets killed in the line of duty and makes a deal with Satan to come back to life. But in exchange, he has to basically be a bounty hunter for souls that have escaped hell.
Oh my God, who among us hasn't?
I'd make that deal. And it's a really cool premise, and everybody hated it. It was just ate it. It just didn't last. And I'm like, that's you could kill with that show now. Like, that would do very well.
Oh, people were not ready. God.
Anything else on Saturday? So you're just kind of doing Snick and Hell Comes to Frogtown.
I would definitely be doing Snick. I also saw in this TV guide that around 10:30, you had Weird Science, which is definitely something I feel like I was constantly on Channel 11, always watching like a Weird Science, something from the 80s that I didn't understand. It had already not aged great, kind of, but you would still be watching it.
This was actually Weird Science, the series.
Oh my God.
It's USA Network made an original series adaptation of Weird Science, and they premiered it 10 full years after the movie came out, which is an interesting business model, but is actually a much better piece of entertainment than the movie is.
Oh my God. They should be rebooting that. They should just be... Someone reboot the Weird Science TV show. Hire me to write for it. I am currently unemployed.
Well, I will tell you this. I know some people who are attempting to reboot the Weird Science TV show.
Oh my God.
And I will happily put your name in the ring for being a part of that if they get a green light.
Thank you.
And I'm not even kidding. Dreams come true. Let's move to Sunday night. Always the most depressing night of the week, in my view.
Well, see, I feel like in the 90s, I had a very intense relationship with Sunday because that was when you would watch The Simpsons, this was my religion, probably through season 9, season 10. It got bad before I realized it got bad. But in circa 1996, this was like the only thing keeping me going. And I when I was going through all the different pages of this, I was like, I should try to reflect the various things I was watching, but really if there was just a Simpsons original or rerun on in that moment, like I was watching it, that took precedence over everything else in my life.
The Simpsons was sort of a religion for nerdy kids in the 90s, I think.
Yeah, I was definitely in the Simpsons Club in high school, which was a club where we just met and someone would have taped last Sunday's episode off TV on a VHS, and then we would all watch it, even though we had all also watched it when it aired on Sunday.
What's that shared experience, though? I mean, like that is kind of what the great thing about this era was. Like, you could make friends based on the fact that you'd both just seen the same thing.
I mean, I had my high school boyfriend we dated for the entirety of high school, had nothing in common, literally didn't, I don't think, like each other, but we liked The Simpsons and Dead Kennedys, and that was enough at the time.
That's an interesting Venn diagram that at first seemed strange, but then when I looked in the mirror at myself, made perfect sense.
Oh no, it makes absolute sense. So for me, Sunday nights were always an exciting time for the Fox lineup. I guess it seems like in this moment was a weak moment for the Fox Sunday night lineup. It seems like it was like 2 Simpsons and then 2 Married with Children. But I remember Sunday nights being when you would have like Get a Life and all these other kind of comedies that never quite
color.
Yeah, that never quite took off, but you would be able to, they would stick them in there between the hits.
This was the second to last season of Married with Children, I think. Like it was one of those shows that at this point people were like, "That's still on."
I watched it till the end.
Believe it. Yeah, I did too, and I'm not proud of it. That night, there's also a really interesting made-for-TV movie called Blue Rodeo, and it stars Anne Margaret and Chris Christopherson, and it says, after divorcing her cheating husband, Maggie Yearwood, played by Anne Margaret, moves to Arizona to be near her son Peter, who attends a school for the hearing impaired. Although Peter's disability resulted from an accident, he blames his mother, and she accepts it. Maggie's lot, however, seems to be improving when a neighbor, played by Christopherson, a rodeo cowboy, becomes attracted to her. But Peter is less than enamored of the guy and discovers he's been lying about his identity.
Now, here's my question for you. Is there any modern day equivalent to these type of movies, or were these just too earnest and we are too self-aware and too soaked in irony to go anywhere near like a Blue Rodeo type situation now?
I think that's it, because you have the sort of rip from the headlines movies, which were the sort of Lifetime, abusive husband murder, she murders him kind of movies, which even now we don't really do anymore.
Yeah.
And they've sort of all been overshadowed by essentially Hallmark holiday films.
They've displaced it.
That's all we do now. You're not going to get a Blue Rodeo. You're not going to get the subtle emotional resonance of a hearing impaired child who blames his own mother for the accident while she falls in love with a rodeo clown. And not have it be a parody. And, I think that the world suffers from it. Yeah,
I mean, I feel like we're not even in a place where you could get a co-ed call girl with a Tori Spelling. We can't even support that anymore. Right. It's a real tragedy.
I feel like if we did have that, it would be like weirdly horny. It wouldn't even be salacious and like exploitative. It would just be like kind of like you were like, who is this for? It would be that kind of situation. But maybe I'm a cynic. Monday, what'd you do?
Monday, so we're all in on Unsolved Mysteries. I was very, very big on that. Have not seen the rebooted series. Not sure that I want to see it. I don't know.
I've been told it's very good. I also have been reticent to watch it because anything that isn't Robert Stack, I could not enjoy. And I love Wow, this is going to be embarrassing when I finally... Dennis Farina.
Dennis Farina. My brain was going
Yeah,
Dennis Franz, and I was like, that can't be right. That's not right.
Dennis Franz is close, though, because you have like a mustachioed guy who plays cops. But yeah, Farina, who is great and was a real cop, I couldn't enjoy his Unsolved Mysteries because it just seemed like he could easily solve all these himself. Whereas Stack had that weird, creepy, like Robert Stack would just watch you get attacked by a ghost. Like he'd be like, I'm just an observer. I can't intervene.
If you go back and watch those ones from like late 80s, early 90s, also so many of them are like, you're like, they'll have an eyewitness being like, yeah, these guys took her out in chains and they just marched her into the car. And you're like, why the fuck didn't you do anything?
Oh, yeah. And I always, I was terrified of that show, watched it all the time. And I always say the thing that disturbed me the most about it was the mixture of stories. So it literally in the same episode, you would have Bigfoot and a rapist. So it put everything on the same level, which is super weird to do.
Although, like, looking at my life now, I'm like, this was completely formative for me. Like, in my mind, like, those are the same level of interest for me. Like, I'm like, Golden State Killer, Bigfoot, it's all the same. It's all stored right in the front. Like, let's pay attention to it all.
But I imagine that's just to you, if your affinity for those things was a hearing impairment, I think that you could blame Unsolved Mysteries for it, even though it was an accident.
Listen, I just want Chris Christopherson to prove that he's going to be a good dad. You know, my mom has been through a lot.
It's true, you know, and he seems like he's got a lot of secrets and he might be lying about his past. It'd be great. Here's what would be great. I'm never going to watch that movie, but here's what would be great. If it turns out he's playing the same character he plays in Big Top Pee-wee, who's given up the circus life in order to move into this rodeo. And that is how, in my memory, I'm going to have what the reveal is of that movie.
I support it.
Do you have an Unsolved Mystery segment that is like the one that just haunts you forever?
So these are all like, I feel like this is going to be like talking to someone's mom about something that happened 40 years ago, where I'm like, well, there was a thing with a girl and she was in a car and just nobody helped. But there is something, I want to say it was one of these things, like roughly equivalent to, one of these internet mysteries where they'll be like, there was a woman who disappeared on a cruise and like she probably fell off the side, but what if she got kidnapped from a cruise? There was something.
So the real life thing like that, like something that could happen to you.
Yeah, I think that the sort of the way Unsolved Mysteries really got me as a kid is you came for the Bigfoot. And then you're like, oh, God, I know like a lot about murder and sex crimes now. Like, I just came here wanting to learn about Bigfoot. And so that's the stuff that haunts me.
No, I agree. And a bunch of that stuff was in New England as well.
Yeah.
And some of them were like places I knew. Like there's a rest stop up in New Hampshire that this pregnant woman got stabbed while she was getting a Coke out of a machine in an episode of Unsolved Mysteries. And then the guy followed her home. Like, it's this horrifying one. And every time I drive by that rest stop to this day, I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, I feel like that stuff is just in there. And I spent like my entire childhood being like, someone's under the car. Like,
yeah. Oh, yeah. Also, in this issue, there's like a whole little article about like fun Halloween episodes. And the Unsolved Mysteries has some local content in that in the Halloween episode, which Unsolved Mysteries did do, this one is about Laurie Cabot, the Salem witch.
Yes.
Who is still around. And I remember this segment because she makes up some complete garbage about this woman who fell off a boat. And she's like, oh, I know exactly what happened.
I saw that and I was kind of disappointed that that's what Unsolved Mysteries brought for Halloween. They brought like the least scary thing possible.
They did do a Halloween episode earlier, like early 90s, and it features maybe my favorite supernatural segment of Unsolved Mysteries, which is the haunted bunk bed.
Go on.
This family buys a used bunk bed, already a mistake. And the kids keep telling their parents that like the bunk bed is possessed and has like demons in it and stuff. And then the dad just keeps seeing the bunk bed on fire. And then there's like faces that come out of the bunk bed, and in the middle of the night, they have to pull the bunk bed out of the house and just get rid of it because it's haunted.
But I mean, it doesn't catch on fire. It's just like weirding them out.
It's just like a ghost fire. And they're like, I don't know what happened in the house this bunk bed came from, but, I know why. It must have been real cheap because I'm like, what? The haunted bunk bed. And the reenactments are so wonderfully terrible in that specific one that it is, I actually rewatch that segment most Halloweens.
That is beautiful. That is also, I don't know if this was your experience growing up in New England, but like everyone has a ghost story and they're all really unsatisfying like that. Oh, yeah, there's a bed. It's pretty freaky. Like, every place is haunted in Connecticut, but none of them are like a good ghost story. There's never any excitement or closure. It's just like, sometimes there's a lady in a dress.
And it's just, she lives there.
Yeah.
When you were growing up, did Satanists come up a lot? Because I felt like that came up a lot.
Yes. So Satanists came up a ton, and one sort of timely relevant thing about where I grew up in a town called Trumbull, one town over from the Warrens. Are you familiar with the Warrens? Ed and Lorraine Warren?
Yeah. Who are complete con people.
Yes, I have a real soft spot in my heart because I grew up with all that shit. But yeah, obviously they're making it all up. But they were hardcore into sort of being like, this forest is full of Satanists. And like, when I got a little older, I'm like, oh, that was actually me and my friends. Like, it's not Satanists, but
these Satanists love natural light beer.
Basically, like these Satanists have chewing tobacco, but they're not really sure what to do with it. But there was a lot of that going on. Now I'm like, what kind of Satanist would be living in Connecticut
and use scrunchies?
Yeah,
I think it was just a suburban thing. I don't know what it probably would be now. It's probably kids telling each other like boogeyman stories about MS-13 or something. But when we were growing up, it was always like, oh no, like up in the woods up there, like there's an altar that Satanists kill kids on. Like everybody knows about it.
There was so much of that, and so much of it, like looking back on it, I'm like, oh my god, that was the house of a homeless person, and we were disrupting it. Like,
oh yeah, or like some lonely old person. They're like, oh yeah, no, that house, like he in there, like he kills kids because he's a Satanist.
Yeah,
and he's just like a widower. Suburban white kids, man, they're the worst. Monday night is the debut of Inc., which is the post-Cheers, pre-Becker Ted Danson show where he started with Mary Steenburgen, and it's actually a pretty good show.
I loved there was a brief write-up of it in the TV Guide, which was just funny to read, 20 whatever years later, where it was like, about all the troubles in getting Inc. off the ground. And I was like, I have no idea the troubles of getting Inc. off the ground. But they were like, everyone knows the pilot for this was terrible and they had to redo everything.
Well, there were Satanists that were all in the pilot. And
they didn't have the technology to just green screen them out. They had to reshoot everything.
Had to reshoot it. Also, there's a show I totally forgot about because Baywatch in 1996 was literally the biggest show in the entire world. And no surprise, we got a ton of Baywatch ripoffs, like Pacific Blue, that was Baywatch, but about bike cops. And that was on Saturday night. But there's a show I do not remember, and it's syndicated, and it's just called Beach Patrol. And it's a rescue team rushes to save a photographer before he's swept out to sea, and a surfing lifeguard is paralyzed in a wipeout.
See, I feel like I have been born into the wrong era. I feel like I was born to write, not for Baywatch, but for Beach Patrol. I was born to write for third-tier syndicated 90s television.
You got a real Beach Patrol kind of sense of humor about you.
Yeah, I feel, in my heart.
As a horror fan, are you familiar with the phenomenon that was Baywatch?
Yes!
Have you rewatched it?
No. Oh my God. Wasn't there one where there was a vampire?
Oh, yes. So Baywatch Nights season 1 was just a detective show, which is silly enough as it is. It's literally Mitch doesn't have enough to do, so he opens a detective agency at nighttime, and it's just like a straight detective show. And it didn't do well. So season 2, they decide he's a detective, but he only investigates supernatural crimes. Someone on YouTube who is a saint has edited together all of the 30-second ads for every episode of season 2 of Baywatch Nights, so you can watch basically the whole series in like 20 minutes.
Oh my God.
There's vampires. There's an unfrozen caveman.
Oh my
who goes
God.
on a rampage.
Oh my God.
There's aliens. There's zombies. It is completely crazy.
Oh my God.
It is just one of the most wonderful things America has ever produced.
See, why are we running around making all these new TV shows when we haven't even watched Baywatch Nights?
That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know why Baywatch Nights isn't just like an Adult Swim show now. A vigilante lifeguard fighting monsters? Like, that sounds like every high concept comedy show that we've had in the last 10 years.
Is it that we're too ironic now for Baywatch Nights and for Blue Rodeo? This is what we've lost, guys. This is what we've lost in our rush towards greater self-awareness.
This is how we got where we are today. This is why we're on lockdown right now, because not enough people saw Blue Rodeo and people don't appreciate Baywatch Nights and the art that it is. Like, America, I feel like, oh, what are uniquely American? You're like, well, stand-up comedy, jazz, and Baywatch Nights. And that's our legacy to the world. Tuesday, what'd you do?
Let's see. So Tuesday we had Roseanne. I was a very, very big fan. I would say that beyond creepy television and small children's television, my third big genre at the time was anything about a middle-aged woman trying to figure it out, like a Murphy Brown, a Sybil, a Designing Women. I was...
Grace Under Fire?
Yeah, I can't explain how exactly those fit into my life. Maybe I had the personality more of a divorced lady in her 40s than a 15-year-old who was supposed to be like going on dates or something. But those were always very big for me. And I did notice in this episode description, both Moon Zappa and Todd Oldham make guest appearances.
And Ahmet Zappa is in this as well. Todd Oldham is one of my personal heroes. I was enamored with Todd Oldham because I watched MTV's House of Style nonstop. And in high school, Todd Oldham put out like some book about fashion, and he was doing a signing of it at the Filene's at the South Shore Plaza in at south of Boston. And I made my high school girlfriend at the time go with me to meet Todd Oldham, which surely made her confused, I imagine. And a couple of years back, Amy Sedaris, who I have no business knowing, invited me to the premiere party for At Home with Amy Sedaris, and it was at the Bowery Hotel, and this party was me. I mean, there's like 100 people there, but it was me, Todd Oldham, Michael Stipe, Sarah Jessica Parker. I was like, why am I here?
I was gonna say you've lived that. Why are you talking to me? Why aren't you making connections in that world?
No, I have no business in that world. It doesn't make any sense that I was in that world. And weirdly, I did a show in LA a few years back with Moon Zappa, and it was right after she had broken up with Marc Maron. And so for the show, she had written a short one-act play that was a dialogue between them. And she had her daughter play Marc Maron. And the best line in it that I will never forget is she had her daughter, as Marc Maron, say to Moon Zappa, "I'd like to talk to you about your father's facial hair and why I have it." And it was very funny. And a kid I went to high school with who I didn't really talk to, but like randomly saw on Facebook, I was in LA and he was living out there and doing the show, like just came to the show. And he was like, "Oh, are like all the shows like this?" And I'm like, no, they're not all like this. What a weird one. This is when Roseanne started to get into the like, it's not the season where they won all the money, but it's like kind of getting there.
They're running out of ideas, kind of. There was an article in the front of this TV guide that was like, Sarah Chalk, who was the second Becky, like, she went away, now she's back. And just thinking about that now, the toggling back and forth between Becky is on that show. I'm like, that place is obviously extremely unstable. How are you doing that?
And sometimes in the same season, like they'd have original Becky and then Sarah Chalk, like it would just switch in like one episode to the other.
Yeah, like that. Like if you're not doing that in an Adult Swim way, I feel like that's just like a situation that's so out of control.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Completely weird. And they just leaned into it. Like at one point, I remember in the post-credit sequence, they had a recreation of the opening credits to the Patty Duke show, but with both Beckys.
Yeah.
So they were like, all right, we'll just lean in here. And I did enjoy. Did you watch the Roseanne reboot, like pre The Connors?
I did not see that. Roseanne has broken my heart many times in the interim. I can't get back on her trolley.
Oh yeah, no, and I wouldn't expect you to. But in the first or second episode, they bring back Sarah Chalk as a woman who hires original Becky to be a surrogate for her child. And there's all these jokes that are just very funny, but based on the fact that you know that they both played Becky. It's weird. It's real weird.
Madness.
Yeah, that's the world we live in. Anything else on Tuesday night?
Let's see. The other things I'd be watching on Tuesday. Now, this is a phenomenon that I guess has dropped off. I would be watching Home Improvement, but not enjoying it. I would just be watching it because it's there. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that was a real genre of successful TV shows that would just be on at a time where there were no better TV shows. And you would just be like, this is better than being alone with my thoughts for half an hour. Like, sure, I'll do it. Fine. Yeah,
you're not going to turn the TV off. And I think that's what explains Tim Allen's entire career.
Yes.
That's a show, and I know people who listen to the show love it, and I apologize that I disparage it all the time, but I really dislike that show. I hated JTT. The best way I can describe the feeling of watching Home Improvement for me was if you go to sleep at night in your own bed, and then you wake up in the middle of the night, and you're suddenly in your pajamas, but in the middle of a Hess gas station. Like, the reaction you would have is how I felt watching Home Improvement. But you passed up a classic, Homeboys in Outer Space.
I mean, I was trying to be authentic to what I did at the time. I was aware of Homeboys in Outer Space. I would have to confess I did not watch Homeboys in Outer Space, although I feel like I saw the commercials constantly.
I just have to read the description here because it is truly a thing of beauty. Ty and Morris, played by Flex and Daryl M. Bell, celebrate Morris's birthday with a vacation to the pleasure planet Fallopia, little realizing that they're going to be sacrificed to a volcano.
Homeboys in Outer Space is one of my husband was raised in like a no TV household, and every so often I'll mention a TV memory where he'll like think I'm like fucking with him, and Homeboys in Outer Space is one of those. It came up a few weeks ago, and I was like, you remember Homeboys in Outer Space? And he was like, I was allowed 1 hour of TV a week, and it did not involve Homeboys in Outer Space. But
yes, was that on PBS? Then no. I don't recall that show. Homeboys in Outer Space sounds like it would be fun, like Leprechaun in Outer Space is, and sadly, not a fun show. Fallopia. Someone got paid to write that.
It should have been us, man. We should be getting paid to write that right now.
It should have been us. The whole 30 seconds it took us to write Fallopia, we'd cash our check and go home early. Wednesday, what'd you do?
Let's see. Wednesday. Oh, okay. So Wednesday, you have a lot of, a decent amount of just sort of watch it because it's their content. You got your Wings. You got your Third Rock from the Sun, which was somewhere between watching it because it's there and enjoyment for me. I had a little bit of a formative crush on Joseph Gordon-Levitt during his like very floppy hair years.
Yep, his 70s look years.
Yeah, where everyone all teenage boys on TV had like a Anna Wintour bob haircut.
Yes, the mushroom.
Yeah. I'm not totally sure about that, but I would watch that. And then at 9 p.m., we're going full on middle-aged woman figuring it out with Grace Under Fire.
Which I really like that show.
I've not seen it since I was a kid, but I remember being very attached to it.
It's on like MeTV or Laugh or one of those like cable, those like over-the-air digital channels now. And I rewatch it and it's a good show. It's a good sort of blue-collar, sweet family show that's also funny, and Brett Butler is likable, even though apparently an absolute nightmare, but worth revisiting.
Yeah,
I'd say
it was just that was so of that moment. I'm not sure what it was about the mid to late 90s that made that so saturate the culture, but I enjoyed it for whatever reason.
See, I 100% would have watched Townies, which is a show that I loved. It was super short-lived. It takes place in Gloucester, Mass. It stars Bill Burr, Molly Ringwald, Ron Livingston, and Jenna Elfman. It is like if Friends was a show about people who were poor. And Dana Gould worked on the show. It's actually a really good show and has maybe my favorite Thanksgiving episode of a show ever. and everyone hated it, especially around here.
I was going to say, I have never heard of it. My only exposure to it was the brutal critique of it in this issue of TV Guide.
Yes, it's a funny show, and it also is. It's one of the last shows I can remember where like young, beautiful people were actually struggling. Like they're all poor and they wait tables and, life is kind of sucky. It's not that like aspirational, like they all live in a huge apartment and sleep with each other kind of thing. It's kind of like, oh no, life is hard and it kind of sucks. And it's funny though. It was that kind of show, and it's a fun show, and it ate it. And it was Molly Ringwald's big return. She had been living in France, and this was her like big return to stuff. And for whatever reason, people just hated it. And I got to talk to her about that, and that was maybe one of the highlights of my life.
Do you think people just didn't want to watch shows where people had jobs at that point?
I think that's a big part of it. I think that, the network clearly greenlit it because this was the very tail end of, after Cheers ended, the networks didn't understand how to do a good show, and they thought the thing that everyone liked about Cheers was that it was set in Boston. So they had about 12 shows set in Boston, like Two Guys, a Girl, and a Pizza Place, and Boston Common, and they were just awful shows. So they greenlit this show, and weirdly, it sort of has more of the DNA of Cheers in that the humor makes sense because it's people who are in a tough living situation, and you crack jokes to like get through it. And Friends had just debuted, and that's the road people took. Like, they didn't want actual struggles, and Roseanne was ending, and Grace Under Fire was ending. It was like people wanted stuff that was more escapist, I guess. Even though Townies, Jenna Elfman and Molly Ringwald aren't waiting tables at a dive bar in Gloucester. But it was much less aspirational than everything else that was a big hit, I think.
I mean, because I feel like that's it. I was, I think all the time about Friends, like, I don't know, did anyone, like, yeah, people had jobs on Friends, but like, I don't know, do you know what a paleontologist does all day? Like, you don't, and they don't show it. It doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter. And they were living in just an unrealistically comfortable situation. Like, I don't think anyone was like, oh man, how am I going to pay my bill? Like, literally in the Thanksgiving episode of Townies, at the end of the episode, it's, Lauren Graham is in the show, and she's great. And she makes this speech about how it's going to be everybody's worst Thanksgiving ever. And so when people ask them in the future what their worst Thanksgiving ever was, they're going to be able to say it was this because everything goes wrong. And she goes, and now I'm going to write a bad check that's going to bounce for pizzas so we can at least eat them, and I'll deal with it tomorrow. And it's like, yeah, people just didn't want that. There
was such a weird national mood in like the late 90s. I feel like, yeah, just we're pretending everything's great. I remember being in high school and people being like, we're never going to have another war again. The next war is going to be fought on the moon with robots. Like, it's just smooth sailing from here on out.
We were the generation that you could argue, I guess, like AIDS was sort of a major threat and crisis. But even then, like, kids I know growing up, it was just like, we're rubber, whatever. Like, it just didn't matter. But we didn't have like a mass extinction event for young people.
No.
Because we didn't have a war. We didn't have anything. Everyone was going to college. Like, it just, it seemed like everything was Brave New World, and we had, the internet and all this stuff. So it was like, little did we know it was like a 10-year blip.
I and I guess everyone else thought the good times would never end. And I guess that's why Friends was popular, even though not personally a fan.
That's why you moved to New York.
I am talking to you from my enormous loft that I afford by singing my folk songs in a coffee shop.
Yeah, I really thought that you getting that giant Central Perk cup couch was a little much, but now that I've seen it in context, like, it really works for your place.
It makes sense in my lifestyle. You have to be familiar with my lifestyle.
That's true. Yeah. It's a lifestyle choice. That Thursday News Radio is on, which I would watch. I was not into the NBC Thursday nights by this time. Like, I couldn't do Cheers. This is sort of the tail end of Seinfeld when it got like a little bit too big for its britches, and Larry David had left, and it was just like, I was a little too snobby for it.
My Thursdays were oriented always around watching Seinfeld, and I guess I didn't really go off. This wasn't the last season, no. I didn't really go go off it until the last season. I was with it pretty hard at this point, and so the whole Thursday would be sort of getting everything done in time for Seinfeld, like making sure, there's no distractions while you're watching Seinfeld. And so I would end up watching Friends like by accident because, you just turn the TV on, but never enjoyed it. Very disappointed in millennials for making that the show from the 90s that they're all fixated on.
It's the millennials Brady Bunch.
I mean, and I'm sure like Brady Bunch, it's just, seared into their brain because it was always on in reruns the way Brady Bunch is seared into my brain.
And I'm sure people that grew up with the Brady Bunch were like, this is a terrible show we hate, and thought the same of us. But it's like, I'm going to drop a name, everybody, so watch your feet. Molly Hagan is a friend of mine who's an actress who you've seen in a ton of things. And she was in, I think, one episode of Friends, but she's been in everything. Like she people know from Herman's Head, she was in Election, she's in a ton of stuff. So people recognize her, but in the kind of way where they're like, oh, I think I grew up with her or something like that. And she was shooting a movie up here maybe a year or two ago. And so we met up with her and we went out for dinner. And the waitress, who was like maybe 20, was like, I know you from somewhere. And she's like, oh, maybe, I'm an actress. Or she's like, you were in Friends. And she literally is in one episode and has done all this other stuff. And I was like, does that happen a lot? And she's like, yeah, if people that age, it's pretty much always Friends.
I mean, I guess I understand it in that way, but it is on another level just a real mystery to me. And especially because I feel like the same people who are obsessed with Friends have like no interest in Seinfeld. I don't know. No.
Well, here's the thing that I've discovered, and you may disagree with me, but as a funny person as you are, and as a person who clearly watches these things, I loved Seinfeld when it was on. Loved it. I don't feel like it holds up well rewatching for me for two reasons. One, the humor was so reliant on the reveal of the plots that once I knew them, it wasn't as funny because it wasn't kind of surprising. And two, because the characters were all such bad people who are incredibly unlikable, which is like what the next whole 2 decades of TV became, like it makes me a little bit uncomfortable, or like it's harder to invest in the characters. Whereas I don't like Friends and I don't think it's funny, but if I was coming at both those shows cold, I think it would be easier for me to dial into Friends, as it's such a sort of nothing show.
I mean, that is a tragic and sensible explanation for why today's young people feel the way they feel. I still, there's some stuff on Seinfeld that has not necessarily aged well, but it's still it's a cultural touchstone for me. And I guess I was probably the one person who was like, I love asshole comedy. This can go on forever. This is my favorite.
It's your fault.
I'm the reason that Always Sunny has been greenlit for 37 seasons. That was me. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, we can't all be completely clean. Friday night, what'd you do?
Friday. Okay. So my big my religions in the 90s were Simpsons, X-Files. So much in that Sunday was oriented around watching The Simpsons. Friday was oriented around watching the X-Files, make sure there's no distractions, make sure no one's going to come in and ask you to do the laundry or whatever the fuck in the middle of X-Files. Just really, we're focused in, we're making this happen.
And weirdly, I was actually surprised to see that X-Files, so we're October 25th, so we're the week before Halloween, is a rerun.
I did wonder about that. Yeah. I mean, I guess on a show like the X-Files, it's always Halloween. It doesn't matter. I don't know.
And thinking about it, were there any Halloween-specific episodes of X-Files?
I don't think so. In fact, the only holiday-specific one I can think of is the Christmas one with, I think, Lily Tomlin as a ghost.
Oh, yes. Did you watch Millennium?
I did also watch Millennium. That was my 9 p.m. pick, where you make a night out of it. You watch X-Files and the Millennium. You watch the Lone Gunman series for the week that was on.
I really liked Millennium. I thought it was a fun show. And in season 2, especially when they got a little less serious and there's like some comedy episodes and it sort of predates like Buffy and Angel with the demons and stuff. But I liked that show. I would have probably watched that too. This Friday night, there's also a bunch of Halloween specials on. So It's the Great Pumpkin is on, which, you know, I was 16. I'll admit I probably would have watched. I mean, I still watch it to this day.
Oh, definitely.
But there are some strange Halloween episodes on of shows that I forgot. Like there's a Halloween episode of Hercules, The Legendary Journeys on, where it says Herc gets mixed up with a pharaoh's seductive daughter, a hungry mummy, a dead king's ghost, and Salimia's House of Horrors. like what? There's the Halloween Unsolved Mysteries. There's a Halloween Family Matters, which my favorite thing about this is, so on Halloween, Urkel's ventriloquist act turns nightmarish for the Winslows when his diabolical dummy Stevel seemingly comes alive and goes after family members with a vengeance. Best part about this description, it then says, ABC is advising viewer discretion.
Oh my.
For Family Matters.
So Stevel kills people.
Apparently. But I imagine it's a dream sequence, I'm guessing, because I don't think that was in universe. I don't think that was canon.
Just the next episode, just one of the daughters was gone and they never mentioned it ever again.
That's why. Stevel, he disappeared. Man, yeah, I don't know. But then like Carrie is on, there's a Rick Mail special, there's Halloween is Grinch Night, which is actually a really terrible special. There's a special no one loves called Boo to You Too, Winnie the Pooh.
I have to confess, I have watched that within the last 5 years. I found it on YouTube.
Is it terrible?
It's not good. I wouldn't describe it as good. I believe it is, I went through a period, the same period where I bought this TV guide, a period of severe depression where I was watching a lot of Winnie the Pooh on YouTube. I believe this is the one where Piglet is very afraid of noises in the night, is mostly what Pooh to You, Winnie the Pooh is about.
They call them Halloween goblins.
Yes.
That he is afraid of. Also known as noises in the night. Like when I lived in apartment buildings, I was like, will you guys shut up with the Halloween goblins? I gotta work tomorrow. There's also Halloween on Ice on TNT, which is Olympic figure skaters are joined in the rink by Hanna-Barbera cartoon characters to celebrate the tricks and treats of Haunted Holiday, including Nancy Kerrigan and Scott Hamilton.
You know, maybe this is an unpopular opinion. Sometimes I really miss having had, you know, no TV options. Sometimes I miss networks knowing that they just had you hostage, you had nothing to do, and so they'd be like, fuck it, Halloween on Ice. You watch it, it's there. Yeah. I bet it was beautiful. Get
me Nancy Kerrigan and a guy dressed up as Magilla Gorilla, and I want them ice skating together. And that's going to be on TV. Also, and I 100% remember watching this because for some bizarre reason I was obsessed with like fashion shows and like I said, House of Style. The 1996 VH1 Fashion Awards, which was aired live and featured performances by Toni Braxton and Garbage and a special guest, David Bowie.
Why not? Why not to all three?
All right. And this night is the debut of Millennium, by the way.
Okay, I saw that tag and I was not totally sure, but that would have been very exciting.
Here's a fun fact. Lance Hendrickson, star of Millennium and many other things, met him last year. Incredibly tiny man.
Really?
I couldn't believe it. Like, I know actors are small, but he's like 5'2", and he's always the heavy in things. And there are movies where he's the villain, where he is facing off against someone who I know is over 6 feet tall, that now whenever I see that, I just picture him standing on boxes, and it's amazing.
I was going to say, do you think they're walking in a ditch? They're making the tall person walk in a ditch?
I'm thinking they make him taller, is what I'm guessing.
I read a magazine article probably 25 years ago about the making of the movie Circle of Friends with Minnie Driver and I believe Chris O'Donnell, where Minnie Driver was made to walk in a ditch so that she would not be taller than Chris O'Donnell. And I do think about that all the time, and I just wonder who else is being made to walk in ditches, and we just don't know about it.
That's like a figurative, literal representation of how Minnie Driver was treated in that film. Get in the ditch. Shut up. Chris O'Donnell's here. So that is the week, but as you know, TV Guide, it is not just informative, it has opinions, and it cheers and it jeers, and I would like to read to you the cheers and jeers of this week, the pre-Halloween week 1996, and see if you agree or disagree with these cheers and jeers, if that is acceptable to you. So the first one we've sort of discussed already. Where can I find the cheers and jeers? I just looked at them. Hold on one moment. Is there anything you're watching in lockdown, like any sort of comfort shows you're watching?
For a while, I was going through Parks and Rec when I thought lockdown was just going to be like a few weeks, and I hit the end of that pretty quickly. We are now the one TV show that my husband, who was raised without TV, has watched ever is The West Wing, which I have not seen. So we're watching that now, which is, I gotta say, for anyone out there thinking about watching it now, I think super fucking depressing. Just when you compare it to the world now.
Oof, that's it. Yeah, that seems like a choice that would just be. Yeah, I don't know if I could do that.
You know, sometimes like for a minute it gets me feeling better, and then I'm just like, I would love actual Martin Sheen to be in charge of this instead. Like just the guy Martin Sheen, please.
I would actually even like Martin Sheen as Greg Stilson from Dead Zone to be in charge, and I think I'd feel better. I think I would feel better from that. Oh, a friend of mine was on the set of the Dead Zone as a journalist, and he's recently been kind of like going through his storage spaces, and he has like 3 or 4 Greg Stilson for president screen printed posters from the set.
Oh my God.
And he was like, does anyone want these over to sell them? And I couldn't do it, but I almost was like, I think it would make me too depressed to have it. But they were really cool.
Oh, that's so cool. I
mean, if you want one, I can put you
we'll talk off air.
with all that, yeah, with all that money you get writing for the Weird Science reboot,
yes.
that I'm gonna hook you. So here's the cheers and jeers. So this is the one we already discussed. Jeers to dubious local color. If you've been watching the ABC sitcom Townies about 3 waitresses in the maritime town of Gloucester, Massachusetts, you may have noticed a striking addition to the show since first episode. Accents. All of a sudden, some of the characters have developed, then some of the time. Molly Ringwald, for instance, can't decide whether her best male buddy is named Kurt or Kat, which is actually not how that would be pronounced, but anyway. Lauren Graham, who plays her married friend Denise, trots out her New England pronunciation sporadically about every 4th line. Lee Garrington, who plays Ringwald's mom, is more consistent, except her accent often sounds Scottish rather than Yankee. Other key cast members, like Jenna Elfman, have made no attempt thus far to adapt the speech. Look, either hire a dialogue coach or drop the charade entirely, because Townie's current effort at regionalization, haphazard and half-hearted, is all over the map.
Now, I have never encountered cheers and jeers before this. I've never read it until I was prepping for this, but just what a little bitch. Just what little bitch complaints.
And the key is, no one has to sign their name to cheers and jeers.
I was wondering, I was like, who the fuck wrote these? Who is bothered by this?
They are the bitchiest minutia of just bitchiness. It is like film Twitter 2019, but circa 1996, when people didn't have to sign their name to these things. And it's the pettiest stuff. Like, even as someone who's from here and grew up around here, like, the accents are a little all over the place, but like, I didn't even care about that on Townies.
I mean, just all of these. The other jeers is like jeers to NBC promoting some of their shows on the Today Show. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Touting Dark Skies, The Pretender, and Profiler, accompanied by extensive teaser clips from the shows. The timing was convenient too, coming the day before the 3 series launched as a lineup. The piece amounted to a commercial, with no attempt at familiarizing us with the night's other viewing options. But why take out an ad when you have a news department at your disposal? Compared to Disney's Today puffery, the celebration of Disney World's 25th anniversary on ABC's Good Morning America the following week looked like a pretty hard-hitting investigative piece.
Like, I mean, I understand it was a different time, but I'm just like, how amazing would that be if that was the end of where commercial fluff ended on the Today Show? Like, I feel like now, like, I open my toilet and there's ads for something on Netflix. Like, you're complaining because it's on the Today Show? The
corporate synergy that runs the world now. Like, it's terrible. And we have 2 cheers. Cheers to honest self-examination. ABC's Nightline, as part of an excellent ongoing series on race, America, and black and white, devoted one show to the ways in which local TV news broadcasts ferment prejudice by systematically playing up stories of violent black-on-white crime. The surprise facet of this story was that Nightline focused on Philadelphia's WPVI, a station owned and operated by ABC, as well as KVUE and ABC affiliate in Austin, Texas. We cheer this example of journalistic impartiality. And obviously, that story fixed everything.
I was going to say it did work. This was the last week we had racism. So, I guess that is a cheer, yeah.
I mean, I agree. And I even just forgot that racism was a thing till I read this.
Yeah, I mean, especially on KVUE, which was the source of most of it. So I'm glad we rooted that out.
And thank God KZUE also didn't attempt to do Philly accents, because if those were all over the map, they could fuck right off. And finally, cheers to talk that is anything but cheap. The Bradshaw Difference takes a radical approach to the talk show format, endeavoring to be therapeutic rather than confrontational. Host John Bradshaw is a noted author, lecturer, and counselor, specializing in recovery issues and family dynamics. Covering topics from stress to teenage drug abuse, his show offers a solid mix of helpful information, pertinent resources, and concrete solutions. Bradshaw isn't glib enough to seem entirely comfortable as a TV personality. Even so, he does make a refreshing, quote-unquote, difference. That is a commercial.
This is also, I think, the common critical phenomenon where you send someone who hates a specific genre of things to review something in that genre, and then they take a terrible example of it, and they're like, this is amazing because I hate this thing. You know, like when they'll send a film critic who hates horror movies to see a horror movie, and, you know, they love a terrible horror movie.
They're like, look, the House of Wax remake with Paris Hilton is probably the best horror movie of all time. Like, it's just a fact, and everyone knows it. I had an affinity for like the hundreds of bad talk shows in the 90s, and I have zero recollection of that.
Oh, I have zero recollection of this also, and you are talking to someone who repeatedly called the Jenny Jones hotline to try to be on Makeover My Freaky Teen episodes. They just never called me back. You know, they're still free to call me back now if they would like to reboot that and make me over now. But
I've been waiting for them to have me on the makeover from Zero to Hero. Did you ever see the documentary about the murder, the Jenny Jones murder?
No, I have not seen that, although I remember reading about it a lot through the years.
It's very well done. It was an HBO America Undercover, and the episode never aired. So they show all the clips from it in the documentary, and man, it's pretty disturbing. I talked to Jenny Jones about being on this show, and she was very nice, but understandably, and I'm not like a gotcha, like I probably wouldn't have even brought it up, but she was like, I don't ever want to do interviews ever again.
Really? So that was just like the end of everything for Jenny Jones.
Yeah, I mean, the show kind of went on a little longer, but I get the impression that really, really bothered her, because that show, they were desperately trying to like just one up all the other shows. And and I remember when they would do it's talk shows, so it was stupid, but they would do like some real things. Like, you know, some heavy topics, but then, it all became like, my stripper mom has got it going on.
Like, I mostly remember the Makeover My Freaky Teen episodes.
That was like, because each show tried to carve out their niche, so I think that's what she eventually tried to make that show about, like how Maury Povich was just paternity tests and Jerry Springer was just fights. Yeah, and they would always try to come up with a rhyme, too, like after My Freaky Teen, it would be like, from goth to noth. It's like, what? That's not a... I don't understand.
From goth to Chris Noth from Law and Order.
From Gloucester. Or like, my punk teen wants to be seen. And I was like, okay, yeah, just call it a makeover show. Just do Queer Eye. That's what we want. We just don't know it yet. Oh, man. Well, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to do this. And I very much appreciate the fact that you brought your own TV guide because this was a really fun one.
Thank you so much for committing so much of your Saturday to talking to me. And at least half of our conversation was, I think, just the New England equivalent of like people in LA talking about the different highways.
Let me tell you something. I'm going to drop another name here, but I had Michael Chiklis on, and a lot of the episode was us just discussing very specific streets and ways to avoid traffic in Melrose, Massachusetts. So, I really think my listeners are here for that kind of content.
It just feels so good, man. I can't tell you the last time I've even said the words tune in out loud to another human being.
Well, anytime that the mood strikes you, feel free to give me a buzz and we can just say tune in back and forth, hang up, and then we'll be good for another couple weeks.
I will absolutely be taking you up on it if this quarantine goes on for much longer.
There you go. That's Gaby. She's great. Pete agrees. He set off all the other dogs. My house is under attack, I'm assuming, by marauding mutants who want my supplies. I've been playing a lot of video games lately, so I might be wrong. But I'm going to go attend to that and create some weaponry out of old batteries and tooth floss. Yeah, I think that's a thing. And I should be here next week because I'm pretty good at fighting off these marauders. But if I'm not, hey, you have almost 500 episodes to listen to and remember me. And also, please avenge me. If these people end up killing me, just avenge me. You got all this stuff in the beginning. I'll see you next week for a brand new edition of TV Guidance Counselor.
This is great. This is working better than therapy and helping me articulate my childhood. So thank you. That's what we had to do before there was a lot of internet access. Just discover which businessmen were Dracula.